Hi and welcome to the new edition of Workforce News. It's been just over 4 years since public health transferred to local government, so we thought today we'd have a look at how that's changed in councils and also how the profession is developing. So we're going to talk to Jonathan McShane, and he's a councillor at Hackney Council, and also to Liz McHugh from North West Employers, and find out what work they've been doing in this area. But first we have Phil Bundy here from the LGA. Phil, you were part of the original team looking at the transfer of staff from the NHS into local government way back in 2013. What were the main issues at the time?
Well, there was obviously the sort of main immediate issue of how we're going to get these people from the NHS into local government and all the issues around the legal basis for that, and then getting the right people into the right place. But back then we were thinking about some of the sort of wider cultural issues about integrating the public health workforce into our workforce, the local government workforce, but also thinking as well about how we're going to make sure that we've got, well-skilled public health people in the future.
So Phil, you're still part of a working group that's looking at the workforce issues for public health staff. And with you on that group is Liz McHugh, and Liz is joining us now. Liz, what are the main workforce issues that this group's talking about?
Yeah, I think the group has served a really important purpose and tackled some really key issues. It was first set up when public health function was transferring to local government, and at the time I think it was really significant in terms of the complexity of the change. So although the numbers involved were very small, actually it was a really complicated transfer of staff and functions for local authorities really. So I think the group served a really important purpose in terms of some really practical guidance that councils wanted, conditions of service that they hadn't been involved with before. And the group has continued to do some work, and I think that's because it's been of service to councils. And some of the issues that it's attending to at the moment, they're looking at the employer standards that all councils will have to adopt, and providing some support and guidance on issues like that. And I think one of the things that they've done which has been really valuable is that they've involved a huge amount of people really through informal networks as well as formal. And the group itself is made up of representatives from the LGA, Public Health England, it's got trade unions involved, public health faculty and the BMA. So I think it's got a richness just around that group really. Some of the other things that it's tackling have been to keep a track of the numbers of directors of public health, so that we can see across the whole country, are there any trends, are there any risks in terms of unfilled posts, and that's doing a job for the whole of the sector in terms of how it's done its work really. So I think it's done some really important work, and I hope we'll continue to do that.
And Liz, what is the group doing to support councils with these issues?
I think the group's been a really important place in terms of debating the future shape of public services, and in particular the place of public health as a function. So I think it's been a really good place to exchange ideas, to think about, well, what's the future role? So they've done a lot of work in terms of future talent, future workforce strategy. And I know that in my own patch in the Northwest, there's been some really exciting work. So the Greater Manchester Combined Authority has actually developed a protocol for continuous service so that public health staff can move from health to local government and back again. So really developing career routes and pathways that are really fit for modern public services really. And the Greater Manchester authorities have developed this protocol, and the group has been able to talk about what might that look like in practice, what are we learning from things like this. And obviously in other parts of the country we've got emerging kind of new structures, new roles as people kind of develop integrated care organisations, commissioning organisations. And for those areas with combined authorities, there's been real opportunity to do collaborative work on public health campaigns, public health population issues, and I think you're beginning to see that that's trickling down to what kind of structures do we need, what kind of roles do we need. So it's really all really kind of important material for that group to look at, because its key role is to look at the future workforce that we need to ensure that public services across the country are really playing their part in improving people's lives.
Liz, thank you very much for that. We're now going to talk to Councillor Jonathan McShane, and he's from Hackney Council, and he's also a member of the LGA's Community Wellbeing Board. Councillor McShane, can you tell us how you're seeing the development of public health and the workforce in councils?
I think in the first instance, everyone was really conscious that the important task was to get public health teams settled into local government, to move them over in a way that made sense for them. They were happy and they knew what their role is. And over the last few years, we've tried to think about how we can use what are an amazing set of skills across local government. So there's lots of really good examples from across the country, and I know that in my own council we now have public health teams advising parts of the council that probably didn't think that they had anything to do with public health only a couple of years ago. So for example, our private rented sector team that advises people living in private rented accommodation about their rights, about repairs, they now have an embedded public health professional working in their team, so that when we're going to see people about damp or about an unresponsive landlord, they can also pick up on any health risks that there might be, and either try and help that individual or report back to the council that there's a broader issue in terms of housing and health. And before the public health team came on board, we just didn't have those skills available to us to make a real difference to our residents.
And can you share with us any particular experience from employing public health professionals in Hackney?
So in Hackney we face some really profound public health challenges. So we want to make sure that we're an employer of choice for the brightest and the best public health professionals who are out there. But we also want to make sure that our public health team reflects the diversity of our borough. We know that many of the health challenges we face are about establishing a dialogue with individuals and communities, and therefore having a team that has a breadth of understanding of the diversity that makes Hackney so special will really help us to achieve that. I'm also really keen that we develop a range of options. Not everyone is at a time in their career where it feels the right thing to do to maybe train to be a public health consultant. So are there some generalist roles that people can take on? And by establishing those, we've found that a number of people have transferred from other parts of the council to work in public health. They see it as an exciting area of work, and they bring with them, and it's really beneficial for us, they bring with them relationships and an understanding of other parts of the council. So that's been really valuable for us. And I'm delighted to say that several of those people, having never considered it before, have got the public health bug and are now on the public health training programme.
Thank you. So Phil, there's still a lot happening in public health, but one issue I know that's coming up a lot is this issue of the movement between the NHS and local government. What's happening with that? Well,
I think one of the issues is that we're talking about voluntary moves here. So when people are looking at coming to local government from the NHS, they're concerned that they're going to lose continuity of service. So we're looking and we put advice out on, what authorities can do at the moment. And I suppose I need to start first of all by saying what they cannot do. And what they cannot do is replicate statutory rights exactly for things like unfair dismissal. But a lot of the time for certain rights, such as, statutory notice periods, well, of course, you can agree that in the contract, can't you? You can agree for things like, the right to take paternity leave, that you will treat their NHS service as continuous. So there's a lot of sort of patching up that you can do through the contract.
What other things can you include in that?
Well, I suppose the biggies when you're looking at rights for people a lot of the times are things like holiday, things like sick pay and occupational maternity pay for a lot of people. So you can, of course, through the contract agree to on NHS service when you're looking at, what holiday entitlements will be and stuff like that. But I've mentioned occupational maternity pay, and just one thing to note on that is that statutory maternity pay, you'll only get that if you've got the sufficient service with the council itself. So if you're agreeing to honour NHS service for occupational maternity pay, you may end up in a situation where you can't get that SMP, and you end up not being able to sort of set it off against the occupational pay that you're paying.
Phil, you've not mentioned redundancy pay yet, and we know that's a big issue that makes employees reluctant to move between the NHS and local government. What can they do about that?
Well, I think first of all you've got to recognise that the situation is more complicated here, and it all stems back to sort of case law that said authorities can only pay enhanced redundancy pay, or any redundancy pay in fact, in line with their statutory powers that they have. So of course this means that you can always pay statutory redundancy pay to someone that's coming to join you, but remember, if someone's coming from the health service, they won't start accruing service for you for statutory purposes until they join you. You can't use the health service because NHS bodies aren't on the modification order. So someone's got to get 2 years service before you're even able to say that you'll get statutory redundancy pay.
But Phil, what about enhanced redundancy pay?
Well, again, you've got to make sure that you've got the power to pay enhanced redundancy pay to the people that are joining you. And of course, if someone's in the LGPS or they're entitled to join the LGPS, then you're able to pay them in line with your policy under the 2006 discretionary compensation regulations that we've got. And what you can do to someone that's joining from the NHS is say, well, look, we can amend our policy so that what we'll do is recognise past NHS service for the purpose of when we come to work out any redundancy entitlement that might arise. But there is a big snag with it. The clue is in the word of the legislation behind it. It's discretionary compensation regs, which means that you can't make sort of cast iron contractual guarantees to people that they are going to get redundancy pay calculated in a certain way if they're made redundant.
So what you're saying is that councils as employers can do stuff, but there are limits.
Yeah, and I suppose the final point to note is that you need to think about the equalities implications, because if you are recognising past NHS service, then it's likely that you may be giving them better benefits than a comparable worker who's already in a local authority. But the point I would make here, of course, is that the reason you'll be offering and giving those greater benefits to the person coming from the NHS is to encourage them to go into a post. So this is all about filling posts, getting the right person into the post, and that can form the basis of a justification defence for any equalities challenge.
Thank you, Phil. And of course, if you have any comments or any questions from today's topic, you can get in touch with us on our usual email address, which is workforce@local.gov.uk. And if we have any updates from the working group, we'll post them as normal on our website.